Hey, Tony.
So I don't think my headphones are hooked up yet.
I can hear you now.
Let's get this.
Need a moment for some technical troubleshooting there.
Well, I can hear all right.
All right. Well, then I'll get started. I'm gonna have to do like a hard cut right at 10 though, so I'm gonna try to end a few minutes early for questions. All right. Well, I guess we'll get started. This is the next episode. It is. Pull up the official title here. Got it. Oh man, busy day in the dojo again.
You mean just my messages?
Yeah, I like it. Okay, got it. There it is. The charisma formula. That's right. Social algorithms 3. And subtext is fools will fear and attack this. So charisma, foolishness, and fear. They have a love triangle going on. And knowing how to recognize that love triangle is knowing how to insert yourself as one of the 3 points that is always just out of reach. So start with definitions. The charisma formula. That's the first half of the title. So charisma, I've got like a little word bubble behind me that I'll get out of the way of periodically. And this is kind of a general understanding of what charisma is, conventionally speaking. Specifically, if we're going to be talking about charisma, then I need to be able to use the same definition for it every time. And that definition will be people being interested in interacting with you in a positive way more than they already do. That's charisma. Charisma is the desire to interact with, the desire to be next to, attraction, really. So the last episode where we talked about direction like that was about anxiety and fear. And remember, at the end of that episode, everything was reduced down, and there was steps to show you how to get there, towards or away. So if somebody is moving away from something, if you dig down deep enough, I guarantee you there's a fear response somewhere. Somewhere. It's layered over with, according to Carl Jung, many, many different stories of heroics and archetype, and according to Nietzsche, good versus evil, and all of these fantasies that we construct to understand the world. Away from is a flight response. And it's a survival response. It's one of 2 choices that you really have when it comes to anything. You're either going to move towards it or move away from it. You might stay the same distance from it as well, but you're still moving with it through time. So even then, you're not motionless. You're just trying to maintain a relative distance, but you are still moving. If you're looking at the information that way. But different topic. So the charisma formula. So the first part of charisma is it's that which attracts. And then when an individual is charismatic, they are attractive people socially, not necessarily physically. If appearance was your physical beauty, your charisma would be your social beauty. So that's another way of thinking about charisma. So now I say the charisma formula. Well, this is what prompts the need for the subtext behind the first part of this, but I'm gonna go this first, is the charisma formula. Naturally charismatic people who can't explain how they're doing it are thoroughly disgusted that there's math behind charisma. The fact that they got there on accident is somehow a point of pride. And the fact that they can't explain it, well, on some level is a point of shame. Because nobody likes to be put on the spot and not be able to explain something that it seems like they understand. But worse, have someone else come along and do that for you, right out in the open, and you've got nothing else to go on. Well, then your biggest trick, it's like someone kind of revealed they broke the magician's code. And the reason that type of perspective pops up is not because there's some sort of magician's code going on. That, if you remember back to the episodes on fallacy and bias, is a bias that is introduced with the word formula. You don't even get to the formula before the bias happens. They're disgusted by their inability to do math, or math-like functions that are slow, complicated, and very meticulous and specific. Who has time for that anyways? Why bother? But how dare you try to make me think that this exists at all? But I won't be checking your work. So this episode says, believe it or not, by the end, that it is a math formula. It's a very elegant set of if-then equations that have been practically tested in the world, not only by me, but believe me, if they work for me, naturally I'm a harsh individual, and I don't say that meaning that I'm a mean individual. I just mean I'm very intense, and a normal interaction for me can feel like nothing, and then I'll later on find out that it was very like nerve-wracking just by level of intensity alone. So these were a necessity for me. These are a calibration device. So when we get into the charisma formula, it's going to be a very specific calibration and a very specific zone that you find and learn to live inside by targeting specific fight, flight, curiosity, disgust, and mating drives. Like that's the language of the subconscious. We covered that. So that's the first part, is the where. That's the formula, and we'll get more into that. But fools will fear and attack this. So why bother with that? Well, there's a reason. There's two reasons, actually. I very rarely write anything without there being a minimum of two reasons behind it. I don't think ideas are stable unless they're presented with at least a counterbalance of some kind for comparison. Otherwise, they're nothing. There's no reference. Something has to ground them, even if it's a reference to something else even if it's a shared reference that's allowed. Do that all the time. It's hydrogen. Hydrogen is a proton, a neutron, and an electron. Those three dudes chill out and they make up most of the universe. So if you do that with your ideas, you've been given a proof of a stable thing that can exist and have longevity. So fools will fear and attack this. Well, there's two kinds of fools. There's the negative parts of the fool. The one who doesn't see, the one who doesn't understand, the one who rejects wisdom, the one who puts ego above truth. That can be a tricky one because fear and emotional navigation go hand in hand, because fear is an emotion. So for people who are naturally oriented with emotional sensation, and when I've covered what that means in previous episodes, specifically people who don't develop the other side of this. So people who are trapped in the logic slash emotion debate. Like they have a team in that game. So those are the individuals I'm speaking of when I talk about this type of fool. This type of fool is the strictly emotional fool. The I feel bad, therefore it is bad. Your words hurt me, so I need to make your words less strong. That sort of thing. Well, why they fear this is, well, they should. You have to remember that fear is a survival response. And fear does a very good job of telling you when you feel inadequate, whether you should or not is a different thing. It always tells you what's going on. You feel inadequate. It's uncomfortable, there's disgust, cognitive dissonance. It goes by many labels, and those different labels just describe the strength of the reaction. It's the same reaction away from. There's a disgust response produced by the idea, and I covered that just a few minutes ago. So those fools, they fear and attack this, but it's really attacking the thing that makes them look weak. Formulas, yeah. But there's a different kind of fool. The traditional, like the tarot card fool, the one who questions, the Joker. Carl Jung, said that the trickster. These types of archetypes. Well, the difference between the trickster fool when they interact with the charisma formula and the regular fool when they interact with the charisma formula is one of them knows what the formula means and they use it while they talk about it, and the other does not. So the fool will still produce fear and the fool will still produce aggression. But because they are skilled and they learn the math behind this, the good pathways, they do it with jokes. They do it in very clever ways that don't leave themselves open to obvious attack. A fool can live and operate freely and make any sort of nonsensical, falsely dichotomic, if that even makes sense, sentence. And because they are speaking to someone who doesn't understand that either or is a trap because they're trapped in it, they will fall for it every time because it's all they know. They don't understand yes and. That's what the fool recognizes. And so whenever the person says either or, the fool says yes, I agree with you and. What does that do to a person who's trapped? Yes, I think you're right, and. But you just said it was either or. So now are you right? So am I wrong when I agree with you, or am I right? Well, the good fool makes you make that choice. All I've said was, I agree with you, and I think there's more. And they always do that in different ways, but it's always the addendum that the fool seeks. The tarot card fool, the trickster fool, the educator fool. They pretend not to understand very strategic ways. The ways they pretend not to understand are the counter to the way you actually do not understand. They are masters of misunderstanding. They are masters of intentional misunderstanding. They are the masters of three wrongs will get you to see a right. Because they're the right wrongs. They're the wrongs you will run from every time. A good fool is deadly with their words and can be feared for the sort of comparisons they can conjure from imagination alone. The things they can put next to something else to make it look small, because it is. Because humans are small compared to each other. Even if every human was the same, great thing, we're 1/7 billionth of our sum total individually. So 1/7 billionth might be a lot, but if you add the other billions, because I'm not going to say that number, it's too long, it's 29s. if you add them all together, it's a multiplicative exchange, and that's if you ignore the added efficiency created by cooperation. So we're operating at a fraction of our total sum potential. So when I say humans are small, I mean what we choose to do with what we can do is very small. And that's why comedy has been around. It's a way to make fun of that. A lack of use of potential in a positive direction always makes a good joke. Yeah, I went to the bakery to get a donut, and they were painting the door outside. I'm never going back to that bakery again. But now you're good and confused. You're probably talking about donuts, you're talking about bakeries, you're talking about paint. And all this while, all the fool maybe cared about was, do you fix it? Which one do you ask first? The fool knows a lot about you if you ask about the donut first. He knows different things about you if you ask about the door. He knows a third thing about you if you ask about the bakery. And he knows a lot about you if you won't play the game at all. The most useful thing that you can give a fool to use against you is to refuse to play his game. Because a good fool has a very good rule for games like that. Either we both win or nobody wins. And I'm going to show you why. So the way you defeat a fool like that is you cooperate with them. Which is what the fool does for you when you're being uncooperative. They create the comparison without calling it out. I'm trying to help you and you're being mean and everyone can see it. So now that we've got all of those definitions floating out there, I'll get into the actual content of the lesson. But it heavily deals with fear. It heavily deals with perspective. And it heavily deals with knowing where the blind spots are. Which is why the trickster is always the most charismatic guy in the movie. Even if he's the villain. Like Loki, Marvel. That's a really good example of how they portrayed that character. He's an asshole. He stabbed his brother. Like he led to his father dying. Like his whole land got swallowed up. If you follow along, he broke the multiverse. But man, do you love watching that guy get into trouble? Who is he a hoot? Always shaking stuff up, telling jokes. That's a fool tasting too far. The point is, he understands charisma, which makes him teacher of this lesson. Charisma is not wisdom. Far from it. Charisma is knowing how to get people to like you. Charisma is knowing how to get people to agree with you when they shouldn't, or when they don't have a good reason to. Charisma is skipping steps. Charisma is instant trust. Charisma is trust that can be leveraged into action effectively. Good charisma looks like it's not the person's idea who's generating it at all. So, before I jump in, any questions?
Heard a few things, but we'll just land with the last one where you said charisma is skipping steps and charisma is getting someone to agree to something they shouldn't, no, they otherwise wouldn't or shouldn't or something like that. Does that mean that they can't? That
What it means,
can't
so
use
what
charisma?
it produces the physical response of hormones associated with trust. So it taps
Yeah,
into
you
the
said when they
body's
shouldn't.
ability. What's that?
The point that I'm focused on is that they shouldn't. It implies that charisma is only present when it is necessary, as opposed to all the time.
So you can understand it. You can understand anything else. That has not happened in a person who cannot say why they're drawn to a person. If the first words out of their mouth are, I don't know, they haven't done the work. So my point is that charisma is the perfect right answer for people who understand things emotionally, or it feels like the perfect right answer for people who understand things emotionally, intuitively. It's the right secret knock. It's the right password. It checks all the boxes of everything that people who understand the world through the sensation of emotional energy look for. But there are many ways to make a thing that looks like that, which is not that, which is what I'm talking about. So it creates trust, but trust doesn't require verification. It's optional.
And charisma isn't optional?
Charisma is an effect. Charisma is hijacking the body's systems and using them to produce an effect. And we'll get into that. So yeah, charisma is like fear, is my point. Charisma is like anger. Charisma is like compassion. It is specific. It is targetable. It is understandable. It's reproducible. It's not special. You're not born with it, at least in the sense that it doesn't come from you as much as you have figured out where it comes from. It was here before you. Very good way to say that. It was here long before you. So of course there has to be a way to pass it on, otherwise it would be different. Well, let me get into it then. What is charisma? So I've given you the emotional definition of charisma, and it's all of these different things. What's the textbook definition of charisma? Low-level attraction without satisfaction. And that's a very specific phrase, and it's incomplete when I say it like that, because it's not a straight line. No, it's like a parabola, or like a sine wave that goes up and down and up and down and up and down. So it's a wave, right? It's a very stable wave. If it was a sine wave, it would be the same wave over time. But with charisma is an interaction. So if it's a wave and it's interacting with something, different waves will produce different interactions. We've talked about that in other lectures. If you have a person who's very positively oriented and we make a mental waveform map like we did in that last episode, their mental waveform map will look very different than someone who is naturally frustrated. And that's how they understand the world. And if someone who's primarily depressed, they will understand it. Their waveform will look different. So what charisma is, mathematically, is someone whose wavelength almost matches your own in the ways that you wish your own could do better. So charisma targets insecurity. Charisma targets shortfall. Charisma targets longing. Charisma targets envy, desire, wanting. Charisma. So what that means is, if an individual is sufficiently educated on the different archetypes of people, meaning there is a vast diversity of human beings, but there is not a vast diversity of human brains. They have the same parts, and with 7 billion of them, there's overlap in terms of default settings. So Carl Jung did a lot of work and said that mostly that organizes us into 12 archetypes. And here's the rules for each one, and here's what they value, and here's the stories about good and evil they tell, and here's what they're missing. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. And the reason I think there's a lot of truth to that is a lot of things try to replicate it, like astrology. You've got the whole astrological signs, and there's a whole mythology behind that. But what is it doing functionally? It's breaking people down into archetypes and saying what they're likely to do and not do. Chakras, what's it doing? It's breaking people down into archetypes and saying that if this one is this and this one is that and this one is not this, this is what happens. It's giving you either or measurements across multiple dimensions to put human beings into these very distinct and mappable spots. It's not perfect, but charisma is not perfection. No. Charisma is not perfection at all. Charisma is vulnerable. Why? Because vulnerability is attractive. Why? Because most people can't do it. And when they see it done well, they wish it was them. And if somebody sees a thing that they can't do, and they don't want to pay the cost for doing it, the natural response to that in human behavior, you can go all through history and find examples of this, is to declare it a virtue, to raise that standard up. So they won't lower themselves, but they will raise another up in comparison, as long as it's their choice and it doesn't feel like it's costing them anything. That is charisma. Charisma is aspirational direction. So let's talk about how that works. Say that I'm meeting somebody who's angry, very angry, and they're not good at it. People who can be good at being angry. Anger is a very useful thing. It lets you know when something is wrong. It makes you care that it should be fixed. Sometimes it does a bad job of telling you where to point that energy. And if it pointed at a person instead of a problem, well, it's just like a gun at that point. You really shouldn't load something and point it at someone unless you want it to go off. So this person's very angry and they're bad at it. They're going to be very interested in people who are very intense like they are, but also can do it well. So charisma to that frustrated individual would look like someone who has their edge, their ferocity, but it's controlled, but it's not held back unfairly, because that's what the angry person understands on some level. They understand the value of aggression, but they haven't figured out how to bring that value out without also bringing out things that are not worth the cost. It's inelegant, but they know, because that's how they understand things. This is the right way to get things done sometimes. And every time they fail at that, well, that's a personal blow. And when we fail at meeting our own standards, we have to make reasons for that. And if we're depressed, we make reasons about how we're just not as capable as we think we are. We're very good at coming up with reasons why we're not capable. I don't know why we're not good at coming up with different ways to fix that, but that's the way it seems to go. So this angry person would see someone who's intense, and they can yell at somebody, but at the end of that interaction, the person they yelled at thanks them. We've all seen that person. That person's in every movie, and it's usually one of the favorite characters. The grumpy trainer. The guy who knows how to motivate you and kicks your ass, but they do it in a way that always helps you grow and never puts you so far out of your depth that you're in danger. But your ego's in danger, because that's what's holding you back the most. So that's what they attack the most. You're being soft, you're being weak. Get your shit together, you're an adult. Too bad. That's what that character says in those movies. We love them for it, because at the end of the movie, the hero, they power up. They get the shit done because, well, they learn how to take their balls out of their purse and man up. Or if that's not applicable, they learn how to grow a pair and man up. Pick your metaphor, or don't pick at all. It's optional. But that's not a charismatic individual to everybody. Some people will look at that trainer, people who have had a bad interaction with somebody who's angry. They won't see the good parts of anger. Well, a charismatic person isn't just charismatic to one type of person. They have the ability to connect with people of all different walks of life. That's what charisma is the ease of connection. Social lubricant is charisma. Maybe that person had a good interaction with a teacher who was patient with them and didn't raise their voice because they had a sensitivity to that, to loud noises and other types of corrective behavior. Well, this person then would value the strong, silent type. The person who knows how to speak while they're shutting up. The person who knows when to let someone else's words just hang because they don't warrant a response. And the longer they go unresponded, the longer they will be the last thing anyone is thinking about. They will make a person live with the consequences of their own words for as long as they think is necessary. So that person who has that value and has a rejection of anger, well, this other charismatic individual would recognize that and say, this person needs a stable, even keel energy that trends positive, that trends adventurous, but is always grounded. It's always safe. It's always logical, self-contained. That's charisma to that person. And that's that's tough to explain that way, but it's easy to see somebody do it. That's the person who's calm under pressure. The person who someone has a problem and it's big to them. And they're the even voice that says, okay, I'm concerned with you. You came to me and I can keep a clear head while you tell me what's going on. Let's work on this together. There's a lot that just got said. Every word that just got said was a piece of a charisma formula, which is a different way of saying it's knowing exactly what that person needs to give them the confidence to connect with you. They don't have it on their own. So charisma is almost showing someone how it's done without explaining it. And that has value on its own because human beings are pattern recognition machines. And we will pick up things from the things we interact with. How many people do you know that have movie phrases they quote? Fictional people saying fictional things in a pretend world that resonated so strongly that tens of thousands of people have made that specific collection of words a part of their everyday life. Tell me that's not charisma. Tell me that's not transference. Tell me that's not making a person want to do a thing they couldn't do before. And anytime a person does a thing they didn't think they could do before, they will feel like they have more power than they did before, because that's Nietzsche. That's the nature of human beings. Especially when a creature defines itself so often by what it is not. The introduction of something new about what it could be is like crack cocaine, which is what charisma is. Charisma is drug addiction. Can be, anyways. Charisma is the ability to produce dopamine and serotonin and oxytocin in another human being. And the way that you do that is you trigger the body's centers that produce that. And we've talked about how to do that through memory. You make them remember something that doesn't happen. That's a story. A story is remembering something that didn't happen. Imagination is a different way of saying it, but you take them on a very specific mental journey. So the first thing you need to do in an interaction, if your goal is to produce charisma for yourself, is you need to understand who you're talking to. Understand your audience. Bigger audiences have different rules than smaller ones. That's the same thing as saying a carpet bombing is useful in some situations, and a precision drone strike is better in other situations. One-on-one, the more precise you can be, the less steps you need to take to get there. And the more strong your finished product will be because it was uniquely forged from a very specific goal to connect one individual to one other individual, which means it has sensitivity across many dimensions. Whereas the goal of a publicly charismatic person really is to avoid triggering too much disgust and to present just a little bit of a promise and mystery. But here's the key. Here's how charisma works. Here's how everything works. You really want to get down to it when it comes to power. So I'm making a corollary here between charisma and power in general. Power is potential. Use it for good or bad, up to you. Power is the ability to do something someone else can't. So when that comes to charisma is the ability to get trust faster than someone else. In a survival situation, how big could that be? You got 30 seconds to decide which one is the right person to go with. Do you pick the guy who's an asshole, or do you pick the guy who makes you feel good and seems to listen to your ideas because he says you're smart, or at least doesn't make you feel like you're dumb? Is that person the best choice? Who knows? They just feel like the best choice, and they know it. So the first thing is, charisma is unique because it produces a paradox inside people. Because it shows them something they want, and it also shows them something they're afraid of at the same time. And it's the same thing. That's where the power of charisma comes from, is it makes people look at something they're afraid of, and it makes them not scared of it. But that's only because it produces an outlet for the person to choose to ignore their fear and substitute it with something else, which is adoration. So charisma is a bait and switch for fear and vulnerability in ourselves. We use other people to do this. They become proxies in our story of what kind of people we could be if we wanted, or what kind of person we really are deep down that no one else understands. That's a good one. I'm this person, but you would never tell by measuring my actions or words. Oh, but that's who I am. I can tell you that because that's how I feel. That's the dream. So when you get down to producing charisma, I'm going to speak broadly because that's pretty much all that I have time for to really go in depth. But I'll do a couple specific examples too. The vulnerability, confidence, consistency, positivity, empathy. That's charisma. And there's a caveat here, because it shouldn't need to be a caveat, because I've given you a recipe. And that's all that's supposed to go together. But human beings aren't very good at keeping their ingredients separate. So I'm going to put like a little warning in the margins here. Charisma is not compatible with being disgusted at your own vulnerability. Charisma is not compatible with a need for validation from others. Charisma uses the need for validation of others. That is why it's not compatible with needing validation from others. That's something different. It's not good. Different topic. So when I say that those are the ingredients of charisma, that's very much an equation, like formula. You need to figure out which one of those things, in which order is the right order for this interaction, because they're all the right answer. But depending on who you're talking to, the order changes because different people have their peaks and valleys in different places, which means their order of importance is different. Everything is on the list, but their top 10 is in a different order than yours and everyone else's, individually, but you'll find crossover if you have a large enough sample size. So where do you start with charisma? Well, it's a fool's task to think that there's one right answer to this that is specific. There's not one right answer, there's one right formula, because the world is not so cut and dry. Proper perspective is not either or. Proper perspective is not this and that. Proper perspective is a combination of yes and. The way you find which yes and things are appropriate and consistent with themselves is through proper measurement, which is either or, and it's very specific. If you mix them up, bad things happen to your data and you don't get a good answer. You try to measure a thing that should be either or, but you start throwing in yes and, your measurement is meaningless because it can mean anything. So good job. Yes, you've imagined a thing that could exist, but it's not useful, at least not in the way it's being presented. Or the perspective is either or. We've spent a whole episode on how destructive that is, and most of that episode was on how that environment, which would naturally produce this, is artificially created and perpetuated, which I don't agree with, but just one guy, what am I going to do about that? So when I say that charisma feeds on vulnerability, that is because at the heart of charisma is the ability to succeed with it and to succeed without validation from others, or at least that's what the appearance is. So we're going to reduce now charisma for the purposes of this formula because it works. We're going to reduce charisma down to a quest for validation. All right, a personal, subjective quest for validation. And every person is on that quest all the time. And you can tell how well they think they're doing by their current level of happiness. If they're depressed, they don't feel it at all, and they probably wish someone else could feel it for them. What you hear, nobody likes me. Why won't anybody be my friend? Why don't people reach out to me? Why aren't people active, or why aren't people happy next to me? You're not any of those things. Fair enough, maybe you've got a reason to not be any of those things, but that doesn't change the fact that you're not any of those things. And somebody next to you might be those things, and a comparison is made, and your mind's not going to lie to you. The person is happier, but why that person is happier is not cut and dry. It's not either or. If you try to make it either or, then that shows you that you're still in the trap. Oh, I would be happy too if I had a lot of money. You're delusional. You're reducing happiness to an either or choice. You don't have happiness and you think you know why. But because you think it's an either or choice, you confuse the fact that you're thinking about things in either or choices at all as a source of your unhappiness. No, you just start picking either's and ors until you run out. You could guess at that game for 1,000,000 years, and the only thing you would learn is that it's not either or. And that's why it fails, which is why people get so disappointed after they get the things they want. Because the thing they wanted wasn't what they needed. But they didn't know that because they really didn't understand why they wanted the thing they wanted. And that's where charisma comes in. Charisma understands why you want what you want better than you do. or at least it pretends to, or at least it reflects that. There's different types of charisma. There's charisma with wisdom behind it, and there's charisma without wisdom behind it. It's one way to divide charisma, many ways to divide charisma, but that's one specific dimension. It has wisdom or it doesn't. If it has wisdom, then the advice will pan out. The growth will happen. The things that they promise will be there, fantastical as they may sound. Charisma without wisdom exploits, takes advantage, it absorbs, it feeds. Charisma without wisdom is vampirism. Strong emotional connection. The ability to latch on and feed. Take that validation from them because you're giving it to them. At least they think you are. From your perspective, if you're not wise with your charisma, if you're not moral or ethical with your charisma, there's something else going on that is going to make that come back at you in other ways. So you will succeed at convincing people you're great, but your actions won't back you up. And the people you will be able to convince that you're great will become increasingly dumber the longer things go on, because they were the only ones who will want to live with the validation you give them more than they want to live in a world that is more accurate, but is without that. Because you're giving them something they can't get themselves. Charisma with wisdom behind it teaches you how to produce charisma on your own. Charisma with wisdom behind it will direct and limit and corral. It's because your food, your money, your things to charisma without wisdom. You're a function, not a human being to that person. You're a means to an end. But it's not a one-sided exchange. It's just a bad deal. Which is why I say it's drug addiction. The brain responds very specifically to feelings of power. When the brain feels powerful, the body feels good. I'm confident. Things are going well for me. I know how to handle what's coming up. I don't have any worries. There's a calmness and a certainty behind that that doesn't ask for anything from anyone. And it's almost presented in such a way that to challenge it would make you look petty and foolish. And people will, which is good for someone who is properly trained with charisma. Because you need opposition to rally the troops. You need someone to be the bad guy. Somebody to say the bad idea. Somebody to call an idiot. But a person who's wise with charisma and uses it to build might make the comparison. They won't point the finger to grind someone into dust because maybe they were that person a few years ago. A person without wisdom will use that charisma and give people an outlet for frustration because they need to. The system doesn't work if you don't provide an outlet for frustration, when your wisdom is not wise, when your charisma is misleading. You will make people do things that go wrong for them. And those people will have a choice to blame you or blame themselves. No, that doesn't end well for the person who made the message. But if that person is their drug dealer, if that person is the person who says, you're a good boy and you're a good girl, you're doing the right thing and I believe in you, and it's those people's fault that this went bad, and I'm very sorry that happened, and I can feel your pain. They do all of the right things and say all of the right things because they know at the end of that exchange of words, all of your pain and frustration are still there because you have to live with the consequences of your own actions. That doesn't go away. They give you a new target. And the target is not them, so they don't care. And anytime that circle comes back around, they just give you another kick in the ass. And every once in a while, they have to swap out the parts. Oh, the ports are closed. We're not going to get your tomatoes this year. Gas is getting more expensive. Well, we better blame this pipeline. Food's getting more expensive. Well, we had avian flu. Commodities are getting more expensive. Well, the truckers went on strike. A bunch of charismatic people said, let us be in charge of your money. That's what a politician is. A person who is skilled at getting people to say, I'll back your play. A lot of money goes into that. So the point is, when charisma is abused, look for people pointing fingers. They're the source of the problem. Person pointing the finger in that situation, especially if they're the person with the charisma, and their goal is to say, no, this is your enemy. But even that can be misleading because they might be telling the truth. There might be somebody out there who is just genuine straight evil and they're using their powers for bad. And this other person wants to rise up and get a group of people to say, no, that's wrong. And we're not going to take it. We're not going to disagree with each other anymore. We're not going to fight over the crumbs of bad false choices you give. So maybe they've got something. And maybe then when they point it at an enemy and say, there's the cause. But the point is, that is where you look. You don't need to understand any of that going in to know where the relevant information is. Person pointing the finger is the relevant information. Where they're pointing it and why, that's coming down to it. But the fact that you are paying attention to them at all is evidence of charisma. So finally, I'm going to try and sum this down now and to make it a little bit more usable, because that's pretty much the basic theory behind charisma. If I want to make it even simpler, I would say that charisma is knowing what somebody wants and making them feel like it's okay to want that. That's charisma at its core. What do you want? And it's okay to feel that way. And everything else that's layered on top of that is the roadblocks that someone who is charismatic must pole vault and leap around and jump over to reach that destination. Well, ever since I was young, I wanted this thing, and it always fell out of reach. And I was in a lot of pain. And it took me a long time to recover, and maybe I didn't even come all the way back. But with the help of some friends, I was able to face my fears and really look at my life, do that thing that I needed to, because it was so important that I finally couldn't let it go on any longer, because I knew it mattered and I had to go after it. I didn't say anything just then. Nothing of meaning. What did I say? Nothing. I mean, I said words that were designed to produce a specific feeling. And that feeling was vulnerability and connection. And to do that, all I did was talk about things that everybody understands, knowing the right things to talk about when you want to share that experience with another human. Being comfortable talking about those shared experiences. So there's definitely bravery behind charisma, because you have to be willing to say the things that other people are scared to say. And you have to be competent enough to say those things in a way that is not offensive and disgusting. And you have to be vulnerable enough to show that that person now becomes a lightning rod for your vulnerability. And the more vulnerable you are, the more vulnerable it is okay for them not to be, so long as they like you. You give them permission to ignore their own vulnerability on some level, because all they have to do is remember you to get that feeling. And it's a substitute, chemical substitute for what they need to be doing on their own. So that's the proper process in the mind to produce validation, but it's got this weird trigger where it only is tied to this one individual. Because that person is showing you by example and body language and direction and memory how to access the body's ability to be okay with wanting what you want. That's charisma at the core. So if I were to speak about it mathematically then, and to go down to the quantum level, the level that we did last time, charisma is being just out of reach of somebody, close enough that they can see you, close enough that they can hear you, close enough that they can understand you, never close enough that they can be you. Because once they can be you, you are no longer interesting. Why would they be? You don't need anything from somebody that you can be. There's no survival advantage. You can argue that point, but the point is from a meta knowledge, like you're not going to look for new knowledge inside of things that you thoroughly know. For things you don't know. But charisma is the ability to constantly feel like there's more. Be just out of reach, to the point that it's exciting. It's not demoralizing. It's within reach, tantalizingly close. If I could just do blank, if I could just think blank, if I could just mean blank. Charisma is a sequence of if-then statements that trend positive. So maybe one or two of them don't mean much of anything at all, but a person who understands how to check all the boxes of charisma, they'll throw off 20, 30 different signals by the time they say, hello, my name is, and I'm really happy that we met. And you've seen that, people with stage presence, people who command a room by walking into it, people who know how to point their ego in a direction where it doesn't do harm. That's charisma on at a fundamental level. So if you want to practice charisma, then you need to know what the result of charisma is. Charisma done properly results in curiosity. And the level of curiosity presents in different ways. People will rationalize their curiosity at that point. So you could see somebody, oh, I want to know everything about you. I want to hang out with you all the time. I want to watch all your movies. I want to read all your books. I want to do this. I want to do, pretty much the desire to know more, the desire to experience more. That's curiosity. So whenever you engage with somebody and they ask for more in any way, shape, or form, you have exhibited on some level, some fraction of charisma, because it's a spectrum. If anybody listening to these lectures thinks that I teach anything in the concept of either/or when it comes to perspective, well, stop it, you're wrong. It's not what I'm doing. Charisma is not either or. It is not you have it or you don't. The only time you either have it or you don't is when you have 0 and when you have not 0. Everybody else gets different amounts. And if you can be vulnerable enough to be disgusted that everyone has different amounts, guess what? Your value is not 0. You're just low on the scale. Sorry. Fix it. I taught you how. Vulnerability. Learn to love it. You want to be charismatic? Learn to fall in love with your vulnerability. Learn to fall in love with your fear. Learn to be okay with it. Learn to be okay with uncertainty. Learn to be, or at least act like you're okay. You don't have to really be it. That's the thing about charisma. It's what other people think about you. Charisma is a validation-based sport. Charisma is the competition of validation. The people who win are the ones who get the most. If the goal really is to get validation from others, what better way than to be loved by others? To be interesting to others, to be wanted by others. That's power. Nietzsche would say that's power. Other people want things from you, which means they won't work against you because they need you. So, I guess in closing, to understand charisma is to understand curiosity. And to understand curiosity is to understand where curiosity comes from. And curiosity is excitement mixed with fear, where excitement exceeds fear, mathematically speaking. So the fear is a non-zero value. Your excitement is also a non-zero value, but it is higher than your level of fear. You will experience curiosity. If your fear is greater than your excitement, you will experience anxiety. Anxiety and curiosity are two sides of the same coin. Charisma is forcing people to experience the positive reflection of anxiety. People need to know how to do, because it's what causes them pain if they haven't learned how to do it already. And if a person is attracted to that, by definition, they can't. At least not the way that other person can. So I guess in closing, there's rules. Knowing when, how, and if to apply them takes practice and experience, but it's definitely possible, especially with the internet. Find a chat room and learn how to be interesting. You can measure your success by the results you get. People call you dumb names. People think you're being sensitive. People think you're being an asshole. You're not doing charisma right. You might be doing other things right. You might even feel good about it. It's not charismatic. Don't confuse intention with result, whatever you do. But if you try different things, different words, different ideas, different presentations, different perspectives, different amounts of personal vulnerability, different amounts of personal sacrifice, see the results, the change. That's how you learn. Your pattern recognizing machine. That's what your brain is. That's what all our brains are. Pattern recognizing machines. We're very good at it when we focus on what the pattern is. But we all focus on what it's not. And what do you get when you focus on what something isn't? You get nothing new. So I'm going to end the lecture there. I think I covered the stuff I wanted to, at least in the way that I knew how. I guess I got a few minutes for questions, if there are any.
No questions. It all fits. And I'm almost home.
All right. Well, it sounds like we did everything right then.
Yeah, it's it's not a lot to process. It's a tedious amount to process because of
Let
the
me ask you a
small
different
difference.
question that might help you focus it a little more. And maybe when I speak,
Look at what?
do you consider me charismatic or not charismatic? Am I more one than the other?
You are charismatic by your definition for sure.
I mean, you keep coming back. More than anyone, I guess. I guess my question is, you've seen me interact. Do you think that I don't understand how to use charisma? I'm asking for an anecdotal confirmation that like if I'm obviously not charismatic, I'm off my rocker. I'm testing myself from an outside perspective. Am I not able to use my own lessons?
Well, like you said, your definition of charisma, or I guess for everybody's definition, you said it's a validation based in a sense. Oh no, you said yours is 100% validation based.
Well,
But
remember perspective is yes and. So I gave about 100 definitions of charisma in this episode, and I'm saying that these formulas address all of them. Don't get stuck in an either or. This is a yes and, brother, and it spans 90 minutes.
I think the tedious nature that I was speaking of is just in regards to the application of which demographic I'd like to reach with it. And that's what I mean by it's not a lot to process. It's a tedious amount to process, or a tedious way to process.
How do you approach tedium? Towards or away?
Depends on if I want to do it or not.
Okay, so how do you approach this tedium? How important is charisma to you?
It's as important as necessary to stack on to all the other information. And I've already built a lot of information, so it can already sit on all that. But the tedious part would be to discover, from Tom's perspective, the tedious part is discovering why I don't like it, which I don't really care about because I don't need to like it. I accept it. So
We're gonna attack this.
So it'll fit eventually. But I think that bothers Tom. So I think Tom would say
it's perfectly consistent with Anthony.
Yeah.
Like I said that one of the first things I said at the episode is this is an oil and water message for people who do not mathematically. And the fact that you can comprehend it at all and describe it as tedious is not a reflection of your intelligence. It's a reflection of your openness, being able to overpower any sort of discuss sensitivities you have. So you can look at it where other people and say that, yeah, I wouldn't like that, where other people couldn't even look at it at that level at all.
It's not a dislike. Like I said, it all fits. It's
Well, like if you love something, nothing can stop you from doing it. So things that are described as tedious don't seem to have very much love behind it. There's almost a low-level resentment there.
Really?
No, it's tedious. Why wouldn't you use a word as different, a more positive sounding word, like consistent?
Because it doesn't describe the same thing at all. Tedious implies the amount of detailed work to be done, not in a negative way. It means that there's a task at hand to be done that will not be done quickly, and that may have many parts.
You could say detailed. But I think detailed would be more sterile than tedious.
But detailed doesn't imply that anything has to be done.
Or complex.
Neither does complex.
I would say neither does tedious. People don't do tedious things all the time. In fact, those are the things they ignore the most.
Really? Because most of my friends consider it a cure for their ADD. They love their tedious
Oh, it
jobs,
is.
their office filing, and they love their tedious repetitive tasks. And
Are you correcting your general, so are you speaking in terms of Anthony or in terms of general,
my people, remember, my initial
so your
statement, which
people,
I
are your
thought there was a
people
question
indicative
for.
of the general population?
Sometimes.
Would you be able to put them in
And
a room with the general population and not tell them apart? By their actions?
absolutely, if I tested them.
So I guess what I'm asking was neuroatypical, by definition, is not a good stand-in for typical, if you're speaking of averages.
Anything else for you? 2032.
So when I initially started saying something, you started trying to help in some way by saying, "Oh, I've got a better question." But your first question was, "Did I have any questions?" So I'm wondering where you're trying to guide me to.
No. I was responding to your question, like you made me, or what was I doing? You had a comment. You didn't have a question, you had a comment, and that sparked a comment. And so then we were just kind of going back and forth.
Tediousness? Oh, right. You were trying to help me explain to you what I meant with it being tedious in that way.
Oh yeah, I was trying to connect like the definition in terms of where the what's the word? Where the sterile field for the word tedious was coming from. I didn't understand that. Like to me, tedious is not a precise word when it comes to that feeling you were describing. But it can be if you tell me it is, then I just know, oh, that's what that means when he says that. Easy enough. You swap that out with knowledge and replace it with trust that it doesn't change. And as long as your definition stays the same, I don't need it to be the same one I had for everyone else. I just know what it is for you. And you do that for me as well.
That sounds consistent. Like I said, tedious tedious didn't have a negative connotation when from my perspective.
Sure, I
or
understand.
it doesn't.
Okay.
So it's tedious as to its application because I would need to think about it in terms of the people that I know it would fit to. I noticed you mentioned, for example, your analogies or metaphors or comparisons or equations with fear.
Well, that was one small slice of it. If you really want to crack the charisma formula and you want to skip all of the organization of the tedium, but not skip the actual learning of the content. Like if you want to skip right to the learning part of it and not have to rebuild the wheel, that thing you filled out last time is exactly what you need to know how to measure a person. If you can measure a person in that many different ways, that's how many different ways that you can approach them with charisma, as long as your measurement is right. So there's a different method to connecting with each of those spectrums, but those methods have shared root causes, and so it's not as extensive as it appears on the surface, because at the bottom of that is all the way back in the early episodes when I talk about the body's survival systems and the amygdala. If you really want to understand charisma and connection and proper measurement of people, you got to learn the language of fight, flight, feeding, and mating. If you can reduce every human behavior into one of those 4 classifications, you have a reference point. That doesn't mean that that is the only reference point, but it is your first reference point. And you need a reference point to make any measurements at all, but in comparison to it. So you would say, this is a fight or flight mechanism. Well, how would I measure the strength of it? Well, I'll test it. Listen for how many times, how strongly they react, how powerful their reaction to that word is. They want to fight me when I repeat that. It's high. Or they want to get away from me when I talk about this. I talk about death. Their fear response is strong. I can measure that. No, every time I talk about death, that person goes away. Fight, flight. Feeding. Do I make you curious? Do I make you want to do things with me? Do I make you hungry for adventure? Understand, is a person hungry? Is they full? What kind of mental food do they want to eat? What makes them hungry? And then mating, who do they want to be? So if you get those 4, which we covered in previous episodes, that's your branches, your main 4 branches. Your first question, fight, flight, feeding, or mating. Then your second question is, okay, what do I see on this scale of that sheet you filled out last time? And you can have a very good read on where to start a conversation with 3 data points. So if you can get past the first 2 sentences where they give you a response and you haven't discussed it them, you have enough to connect with them. And there's a different science to not being disgusting on first interaction, but most of it is, don't tell people that they don't see what they see. Really, it gets down to it. Don't call them delusional when their own perspective. Their perspective might be delusional, but don't tell them that. They can't tell the difference. Doesn't end well. It can't end well, at least not at the beginning. That's when somebody trusts you enough to let you walk them down a path they'd rather not go. Then they will see their own delusion.
Have you looked at insult comedy?
I think I could teach insult comedy. I don't need to look at it, I produce it.
Isn't that the opposite of what you just said, though? Or at
What
least
is?
on the first interaction.
It's a
Insult
tool.
comedy.
It's a tool, yeah. So it can be the proper use of insecurity.
That's what I mean by tedious. Because your words are right, but there's a yes and to a lot of things, kind of like that.
So it's
the
knowing,
tediousness
yeah.
that I'm dealing with is saying, okay, well,
Oh, I see. So you're
get
still
it.
looking for either or solutions.
But
You're at no. The construct is not an either or solution. The solution is a series of yes ands that add up over time. So you don't need them to work together. You only need them to be stable. They're one and done and move on. It's like hitting notes in a symphony. The one note only needs to be hit at the right time. And you can hit the same note at a different tempo. But if you stop hitting notes, you stop playing. So it is not recognizing all of the possible places a conversation can go. That's useful, but at its core, it is recognizing where a conversation is and where the other person wants it to go, which is
well,
really
it's all
a
useful.
short measurement. What's that?
I said, well, it's all useful.
Yeah. Well, just if you were like, what I was seeing was a year ago, during the 6 months it took me to map charisma, I saw you go down the first 2 paths that I took that were wrong. In a period of about 5 minutes. So I was using my experience and trying to give you a time warp of about 6 months of, yeah, you can go down that path and you will learn, but it's the slowest way to learn. And if you start at this end, it backfills a lot faster. So same result, less work, backwards order. Take your pick. Your tolerance with how weird things are will determine how much of that you can dive into. People do things in stages because that's how they have to. But if you can handle a brain flood of a whole bunch of shit just making sense, and you have no idea where it came from until after all that stuff shakes loose and you have a chance to unpack it, that's how you get there. Be careful with that. You do that too big, you'll have an ego panic attack, existential panic attack. And it won't be.
I keep thinking, hearing, and seeing you talking about what happened to you that made you scared and afraid.
Yes.
And you talk about it as if it should make everyone scared and afraid.
No, it's not that.
Or is likely to, or okay, let me put it this way. You think everybody, no, you take care to warn me so I don't end up in the same fear spaces that you've been in. But I don't think I fear those spaces.
I don't fear the spaces. I fear the ways that people enter and leave those spaces.
So then you got what I was saying?
Yeah, but I just wanted to make it clear that the goal was not to to avoid, the goal was to say, there's one way that I did that this goes really wrong. And as long as I'm here, I can share that with you at zero cost. And if there's a discuss sensitivity in response to that, well, who knows where that comes from? But
And
other
every
than a
time you say
well-intentioned,
it went wrong for you, but every time you say it went wrong, my question, I think, why does he think that was wrong? Or
because
why did he, or did he not like that just because he got out of control?
no,
Or
it's nothing
am
like that.
am I in the same, or does he think I'd melt in the same way? Or does, like, so whenever you talk about that, because you
Mhm.
brought it up a few times now in a few different lectures, and I've gotten a scope of
Yeah,
where Tom doesn't want to be, or the feeling or feelings of the past that Tom doesn't want to repeat, or that Tom didn't like, or
mistakes
that
that Tom has learned from is a good way to say it.
yeah, and every time I goes back to better safe than sorry. Every time you say don't do it, it goes to better safe than sorry. And I told you
So
that many months ago too. So
the last,
every time you tell me I don't want to go somewhere a way, I'm just thinking, dang, it sucks he can't go there that way and get more.
what does that make you want to do?
Keep listening to show you how, because I feel like I can get there easy and it doesn't scare me at all. And I don't know what to be afraid of.
That sounds like charisma to me. It's just Anthony's charisma, very specifically tuned.
And at the beginning, when you talked about keeping someone interested, it made me think of the quote that was be weird enough to get people's attention and then interesting enough to keep it. And there's a lot of yes ands in there to be broken down or thought about too, if I chose to. I mean, I'm fine. Like I said, it all makes sense. So it'll melt in with more information and more interactions and things like that. Nothing was wrong, but for Tony, it's always about, or not always about, but with this information, especially this information that's real applicable, like all the quantum physics stuff, it's like, okay, I should get this. But this is like,
Right.
okay, I should get this, and I should be able to apply this lecture more than other lectures that I've said at the end I don't have a question to.
Yeah.
And the way I would be able to apply this lecture is by getting a better reflection of who Tom has dealt with and how that's gone.
If
And
you
what
want to
has
know
come of
how
it.
Tom really understands people, like at a core level, people are if then statements to me. And they're a collection of if then statements. They are a yes and collection of if then statements. And my if then statements are that map that we filled out last time. So if you can understand a person across that many if then statements, and you can apply that knowledge the way I can, which might not be now accessible to everyone else at every stage of their own development, that is everything that produces everything I understand about humanity. So
All right,
if
so
you
let me
want
give
the
you,
map behind it, there it is. And it's
let's
kindergarten.
give you, I just thought of the perfect example for what I meant by tedious when I first started. Tedious is that mapping of the different emotions.
Mhm.
Tedious would be me figuring out, what does it say about Tom that he picked those
Oh, that was a
words?
list that I got from somewhere that tried to cover the whole spectrum of human emotion. So that was a
So
useful
you
tool
didn't,
somebody else
so
created
you
and I
didn't,
modified it.
yeah, so my question would be the modifications, or, okay, so you didn't pick the two words to go against each other?
No, those were scientifically / psychologically chosen and compiled into a list to help people with something else, and I retrofitted it to this.
Okay, then.
Shoulders of giants there. Yeah, you have to, yeah, it's not a Tom creation. You can't throw it out on that front, sorry. You can't give it less weight than it has for that reason.
Well, without that, it doesn't have any weight. It's just a scientist's words now. It's no longer even Tom's. Now it's just Tom's
It was
tool.
discovered. For me, it was
Tom's tool.
discovered. It was not created.
Yeah, which is still fine, but the tediousness of it is still the same. It's still,
Yeah.
why do these things go together? You
I
know?
don't know. If I had this list a year ago, I probably could have learned all the shit I know in about 2 months if I had known how to
Well,
organize it this way.
remember the video I showed you about social engineering and the guy that did all the jobs and stuff?
Yeah.
Remember, that was me in 6th grade.
Hmm.
So you saying, if you had this, however long ago, you could have done it faster. Well, I've had it for over 20 years, or at least had some part of it that you might not have. So
Yeah.
that might just, change.
Well, you've got the
things.
part of it that tells you you're right without needing to know,
How do you know?
because that's how you act. So either
Which
you're a
tells you
brilliant,
how I know.
what's that?
Which tells you how I know.
No, the things that you don't, the things that you
Remember
tell me are
last.
wrong, tell me what you don't know.
But
That's how
remember
I
the
had that
last
part of it.
conversation we had. Remember the last conversation we had. I told you with people who think like us, what we show or can read about each other isn't always there in a sense. I feel like we've had at least 3 conversations where, because of misunderstood intent,
Mhm.
things were different.
I would say
So
that that's possible and likely, but the target is not always what it appears to be. I would say that we can misunderstand our own intent to the point that it's only clear to other people. And those are the things we lie to ourselves about the best.
that goes back to the old conversation we had about telling somebody what they want. Could be a good
Anyways, I
conversation.
gotta
right
run.
now.
I'm past my time. I said I was gonna hard out at 10 and I didn't, so I broke my word. I apologize for that.
Me as well. I'm home with the kids and stuff now. I will see you online in the morning.
Yep, we're almost done with the series, man. We got like maybe 10 or 12 more, and that's it for this one.
Then we get to go back through and compile. And by the way, I think that would be good to do too. Keep the Tuesdays and Thursdays, or Tuesdays and Thursdays, and maybe re-go through them again, or compile differently, or
I can do some good video
maybe.
editing with that stuff. I've been practicing those skills. It'll be nice. It'll be compact, entertaining. All right, brother. I'll talk to you later.
I will talk to you online tomorrow. Good night. Love you.